Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Everybody hear me? Hello. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to be talking a little bit today about data-driven product development, and just a little bit about me and my background. I've been a product manager for 5 years. I currently lead the mobile team at Aaptiv. We are a fitness startup based here in NYC. Before that, I was at an e-commerce startup called Spring, and before that, I was at PayPal. I actually started my career as a product analyst, so I know a lot about data, not a lot about analytics, so hopefully can give you a lot of useful information and how those things can make you a better product manager. And I also went to University of Pennsylvania. So how many of you guys have heard of Aaptiv? Raise your hands. Okay, handful. Cool, awesome. So a little bit of background about Aaptiv, because a lot of the case studies that we're going to be talking about today come from my current company, so it's helpful if you know what we do. So we're an audio-based fitness app. We have over 2,000 fitness workouts in a bunch of different categories like outdoor running, strength training, etc. All are accessible through our app, which is based on a subscription model. We have over 200,000 paying subscribers, and we've been active for just over 2 years. So here's an overview of the first-time user experience. We actually went through a bit of a rebranding about a month ago, so it looks a little bit different now than what you're seeing here, but essentially it's still the same flow. So first, when you download the app, you have to sign up with either Facebook or email. We ask that you start a trial or sign up for a paid monthly subscription before you can actually use our product and sample the workouts. Once you've started a trial, you land on the home page, and then from there you can see all the different workout types that we have. Let's say I were to go into outdoor running, I would see a bunch of outdoor running workouts, and I can filter them down and play workouts. So that's essentially how the first-time user experience goes. So that's sort of the background of what the app does. So in terms of our overall approach, product development here really begins and ends with data analysis. And when I say data, I really mean both quantitative and qualitative data. So every single product or feature that we launch, first we do analysis and research to figure out what are people doing in our app? Why are they doing it? From there, once we have enough information, we frame the problem. What is the thing that we're trying to solve? And then what are the potential ideas or solutions that can help users overcome that problem? Once we have a more crystallized idea of what we want to do, we'll then define the specific requirements that go into that feature, followed by more high-fidelity designs, implementation with engineering, launch, and then finally we come all the way back to analysis and research again to figure out whether or not that feature that we launched actually worked. So in step one, the first thing that we do is we ask two questions. What are our users currently doing or failing to do? And typically we use quantitative data to figure that out. And the second thing is, why are they doing this? And so usually we'll conduct qualitative research with our users to figure out why they're making the decisions they're making. So from a quantitative perspective, we start with a couple of key performance indicators or KPIs that we care about that really measure the success of our overall product. So my product is the app. We have other product teams at Aaptiv that are in charge of the website, that are in charge of our core platform. So we all have different KPIs. So a couple of the KPIs that we care about are the sign-up rate, conversion rate, which is basically the percentage of users who start a trial and then convert to paying subscribers. So there's a 30-day free trial. We want the majority of people to go on and actually pay for a real membership. Daily, weekly, monthly active users, those sort of tell us how much we're growing. And then retention rate, so the percent of users that are actually using the product. We have a lot of people that pay for a fitness subscription but don't always use it, similar to traditional gyms. So we obviously want people to be using our app, to be engaging with it. So once I know that those are the KPIs I care about, then I want to drill down one level deeper and see, are there any specific actions that users are doing that will improve the performance along a specific KPI. So in this case, again, conversion rate is the KPI that we care about, and we look at users who have completed at least one workout during their 30-day trial versus people who have completed none. So unsurprisingly, people who have completed one workout are 80% more likely to actually convert to paying members. Not terribly unexpected. Another thing we might look at are what are some of the user attributes or user profiles that cause them to be less engaged in a certain, along a certain KPI. So if we know that we want users to complete at least one workout during their trial, one of the things that we sort of delved into was how they self-identified in terms of their level of fitness. And what we saw was that intermediate and advanced users were pretty likely to complete at least one workout during trial, but beginners were 25% less likely. So we knew that we had some issue with beginners and we needed to target beginners. So what we did was we pulled a list of beginners from our database, and we emailed them, we brought them into the office, and we did some qualitative research interviews with them to figure out why they weren't actually completing any workouts. So a couple of the things we heard, so we had 3 different women come in. Our user base is like 80% women, so yeah. Krista, for example, said, my first time using Aaptiv, I had decision fatigue from seeing so many classes. I didn't know which one to start with or which one to take. Even when I clicked on a class, I didn't know what equipment you needed. Maria said, my frustration was that there was way too much time between me getting a second of free time and getting started working out. She was a recent mom of 2. So there were way more options with Aaptiv. By the time I finally found a class, I had already lost the momentum to work out. And finally, Jennifer said, I didn't really give Aaptiv a fair shot. It was a lot of work for me to get started. I didn't know how to use Aaptiv to achieve my fitness goals. So a couple of interesting things there. Once we felt like we had enough information to go off of, we then moved into the problem and ideation phase. So in that phase, what you're really doing is coming up with a problem statement, which is a summary of the issue that you think your users are facing. And then from there, coming up with ideas that you think will solve those problems. So after we've defined the problem and the solution, we then sort of go in and we really come up with the really granular, detailed requirements, so user stories, like kind of like what you think traditional product management looks like. So obviously these are just 2 of many, but this is sort of laying out like, okay, what are the actual questions we're going to ask in onboarding? What do a user see when they've gone through onboarding? So I won't bore you with the details of that, but generally that's what that would look like. Again, going back to the need for data and for tracking, one of the things that we always make sure to include as part of our detailed requirements is how we're going to be capturing user events and actions. So we knew we were going to build out a new onboarding survey. We knew we were going to build programs. And so we had to specify what the names of those events were and when they should fire and what information we wanted to capture. That way we can actually go back and measure the effectiveness of this particular feature. And then from there, we moved into the design and implementation phase. So design, there's a lot more in there. We built a couple of prototypes. We brought in people into our office, and we did usability testing. And then finally from there came up with more high fidelity designs. And then implementation is your typical sprint planning and engineering delivery process. So won't go into too many details about that, but this was sort of the final output. So we started with an onboarding flow. We asked users 3 questions. The first was, what is your fitness goal? Get healthy, run a race, build strength, or reduce stress. What's your fitness level? So these are basically trying to figure out if they're beginners, intermediate, advanced. Both 1 and 2, new to fitness and exercise casually, correspond to beginners. And then finally, where will you work out? Some of our workout types are on pieces of equipment that not everybody has at home, like rowing machine, elliptical. So we wanted to get a sense for what pieces of equipment or resources they had available to them. On the home page, we added this new module that was essentially a set of programs that were recommended for you. So not only does it narrow down the scope of everything they have to sift through. It also tells them, okay, follow this program day by day, and you will know every day what workout you have to do. Then when they go into the program page, it sort of lays out week by week what workouts they're supposed to be doing every day. So that was the feature that we launched. And then after we launched that, we went back to the analysis and research phase to figure out whether or not that actually helped improve things. So there were three main questions that we wanted to answer in our follow-up analysis. The first was, how many users are actually attempting and completing workouts from these recommended programs? The second was, how do recommended programs compare to some of our other common pathways for users to go and take workouts? And the final one was, what impact does taking workouts from recommended programs have on overall engagement? So the first glance at the data showed that only 9% of workouts completed were from recommended programs, which seemed very low. Does anybody have a hypothesis on why that is? So this is the first chart you see. You're like, yeah.
I mean, I noticed on the initiation questionnaire that you limit the answer to only one response or one answer. So maybe do that research and maybe they work out outside and also inside the gym.
It actually did have multi-select. The only one it did not have multi-select on was the levels. So sorry, select all that apply and
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so okay, but good guess. So they didn't see the results. They didn't see the answers that reflected their preferences in the survey. Any other ideas? Yes, the beard.
How many recommended programs were there?
There were up to 5 in each. Yeah. Did you have an idea?
Yeah, I think we've probably seen a lot of recommendations, especially through an app store, and a lot of times it's not really that tailored. And so seeing something that's really familiar that doesn't work on other apps probably makes this class so right.
Yeah. Okay. So you're sort of immunized to the idea of recommendations in general. All right. So those are all really good hypotheses. We actually did a little bit more digging, and it turns out that most people just weren't filling out the survey at all. So with new users, we saw that 75% of users were filling out the survey, which was good. But for existing users, only 30% or so were filling out the survey. And then on top of that, we had a whole 15% of people who just never bothered to update the app, and so they didn't even know the survey existed. So all in all, only 30% of the people that were coming to our homepage ever even saw that there was this recommended programs feature. So that was an interesting learning. Then we looked at overall engagement. So we broke it out by people whose first workout they completed was a recommended program workout, and people whose first workout completed was not a recommended program workout. And then we looked at, starting from there, how many total workouts did they complete in the first 30 days of their time as an Aaptiv member? Does that make sense? Anybody confused by that? Okay. So what we saw was that actually people who started with recommended programs, the median, they had the same number of total workouts completed, and in fact, if you average it together, it was a little less. So again, not what we expected. We thought this would increase overall engagement. So does anybody, again, with this one, have a hypothesis on why that happened? Yeah.
Because those people who chose the recommended program were beginners, and they were easily to drop.
Yeah.
Than the existing or usually go work out.
That's a great guess. Yes.
People who did the non-recommended probably knew more what they wanted and were probably more prone to engage with the app overall than people that went through the recommendation club that were probably a little newer fitness.
Okay. Yeah. Those are both really great hypotheses. So we actually thought we had the same idea. So we looked at the fitness level, the level of fitness broken down for each of the different groups, people who started with recommended programs and people who didn't, and looked at the level of fitness within each group. And what we saw was that people who started out with recommended programs, like you said, were much more likely to be new to fitness and exercise casually. And if you think back, like 15 slides ago, those people had much lower average numbers of workouts completed. So it was sort of a self-selection bias rather than the feature itself was horribly broken. So then when we compared before and after the feature launch within those same levels of fitness, we saw that there actually was an improvement for the beginner group, less pronounced for intermediate, and for advanced it didn't really change. It actually went down a little bit. So that was really interesting. And I think had we sort of just stopped at that initial glance, we would have been like, well, this feature was a total bust. Like, let's go do something else. So knowing what we know, what are some improvements that you would suggest for this product feature? And how would you think about prioritizing these ideas? Based on the data that you just saw, what are some of the improvements that you would suggest for this product feature? Love to hear. Yes, in the back.
One thing is that the fact that I'm problem
Mm-hmm.
So isn't our name going to be a rule in the notification framework to drive users to the module as well as drive experience after they
Yeah, okay, great. So some kind of reminder to get people to complete the survey, or even if they didn't actually do it in the beginning. Anything else? Yes?
maybe A has different questions.
Mm-hmm.
For example, one of the comments that was about the time of day.
Okay.
Didn't ask anything about that.
Okay, interesting. So different questions. Yeah.
So also, as I did notice, increases in user categories for intermediate and advanced users were less pronounced in usage of the app. So I think what we could do is adding more intermediate and advanced workouts to those users. And in order also to, because a lot of the existing users, they skip, it's another improvement, they skip the survey, we could potentially automatically categorize users depending on their usage level and the workouts they choose.
Yes, that's a really interesting suggestion. How would you go about automatically categorizing people?
Break them down for instance, by clustering the users into categories. How many workouts user completed and what is the intensity of those workouts? Because a lot of beginner workouts, they are short and low intensity, but if a person, for instance, goes for advanced workouts, then 3-5 times a week, then they are advanced. Maybe show them, maybe automatically categorize them as advanced users and offer them suggestions, not beginner friendly workouts, but something more interesting. As for instance, as I was working with one of the competing apps, and they are offering me sometimes some beginners workout and it's boring.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Really interesting. Yes, was there another hand? Yeah, in the back. Yes, so he said you could essentially automatically assign people into different survey answer groups based on their behavior in the app rather than their explicit survey responses. And I asked him, how would you do it? And he talked about looking at the workouts that they showed interest in or the workouts that they had completed and inferring what level of fitness they are. Cool. Yes?
Can you just have them, when they first log into the app, you immediately ask them what level are they, and then if they say beginner or intermediate, they actually just are required to go through the survey. They don't have the option, and then it will.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we could force the survey. Any other suggestions? Yep.
I'm wondering, at the beginning, how would recommendation engine that would also take a while for, people who survey versus what the recommendation should be.
Yeah. So continue improving the recommendation engine. Yep. And last one. Yeah.
If completion is the goal here, then maybe you want to have a specific, like a special set of onboarding specific workouts that are maybe shorter, have more, I don't know, things that will keep them engaged,
Mm-hmm.
and then almost like reverse engineer it, allow them to like just jump right into a quick workout, and then give them a questionnaire after their workout, say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
how would you rate that workout? Is it hard, easy, so forth? And kind of answer the question backwards.
Cool. Okay, awesome. So these are all really good suggestions. I actually don't have an answer slide because we are in the middle of figuring this out. So thank you for all of your contributions. I will go and write them down, and perhaps you will see it in a month or two. Yeah.
Based off that, can you kind of give us an indication of where you saw like the biggest opportunity?
Yeah, so for us, it was similar to what this gentleman was saying. Our biggest opportunity we saw was that most people didn't see the recommended programs at all because they weren't willing to give us feedback. So we basically wanted to create a way to show recommendations even if they weren't giving us that explicit feedback, whether it was by inferring the level they were, whether it was by showing something else like popular programs or something, but basically a way that would expose this feature to more people. A couple of the other things that we chatted about, it wasn't obvious from this particular exercise, but the most popular categories were get healthy, which is basically weight loss, and build strength. But the majority of our programs were actually running programs like Walk to Run 1 Mile or 5K Your Way. And so the program offerings that we were giving people weren't really lining up with the survey responses, and so that was another area where we're really trying to develop and produce more content that's more in line with what people want. So, but that was, you couldn't have known that because there was another. But so yeah, so it's an ongoing process, and this is actually exactly what we're doing right now, is reflecting and figuring out what we can do to continue to improve on this feature.
So sorry, when you propose just programs, they don't have a way, because I don't know, I'm over if you're a beginner and you want to, I mean, you have 20 minutes now and you want to work out and maybe next week, and I think a program could be quite demanding, you know,
Yeah.
for a beginner, and I don't even think if they can, even if for us, I mean, they could look very easy questions. I think that when you are a beginner and you are not used to, maybe they don't even know how to answer to that. So, I mean, they pick one thing just to put something.
Yeah.
But then in that, they have maybe 20 more, like kind of 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. And,
yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the point was that someone could be so beginner that they don't even know how to answer the survey. And that's definitely something that we also are thinking about when we have a new to fitness option in that survey. And so the idea is like maybe we can give them an even more guided or hand-holded experience.
I think the problem is you don't know, I mean, you understand what it is, but really you don't know what your goals are and the implications of, you know, choosing one thing or another.
Yeah.
So it's more that than...
Yeah, so you not knowing what answers your survey results are going to actually give you. Okay. Any other? Yeah.
So when you find that your product is focused on a different group than is what your actual users are, how do you decide whether you want to target the users that you were originally targeting or change your product to target the users that are coming to your app?
I think that's a really good question. So the question was, how do you, if you learn that your product is targeting a different group of users than who you originally intended, do you decide to pivot and cater to that new group or continue to go in the direction that you'd originally gone down? I think it's a really good question, and I think it's something that the product managers should solve for, but it's also a question that you should work with all the stakeholders of your executive team, of the business, to figure out if that's something that they also agree with. But in general, I would look at the opportunity and the market size of those two different user bases, and hope, like, ideally one of them is more favorable than the other. You should also be able to get an indication of the level of affinity that those two user bases have for your product. Like if you have better product market fit with a totally different group of users than what you were originally intending, and that group is really small, but you know you can capture 90% of that market, like you need to build a business case and build a market sizing model to figure out whether that's still a worthwhile thing to do versus like perhaps this other group that you were originally targeting and maybe much bigger, but you were going to capture a much smaller share of that pie. So it sort of just comes down to like a numbers and estimation game.
So that also depends on your goals. And
Yeah.
Are they expanding to new markets or get new users to increase their attention?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a couple of takeaways. So again, always starting and ending the product process with research, both quantitative and qualitative. When you're conducting quantitative data analysis, make sure you're drilling down the results by different user cohorts, by different actions, to see if the trends hold true across all of these different cohorts. Because as we saw, sometimes it might just be that you have disproportionate representation of one group over another, and the trend doesn't necessarily reflect once you dive in a little bit deeper. For qualitative interviews, have the users describe specific experiences instead of asking them what do they want. So we didn't ask the users, what would you have liked to see out of Aaptiv? We asked them, describe your first experience using the app. And so the results that you should get are less biased by what the users think they want and more reflective of what actually happened. And then finally, never be satisfied with the first version of the feature that you launch. There's always room for improvement, and there's always room to continue using data to improve that feature. So that's it. Any other questions, or this is my appendix, so we'll skip that. Yeah.
How long end to end does one of those cycles take?
It really depends on the feature, right? So this took 2.5 months end to end, but it was a very large lift from an engineering perspective. It was a pretty complicated, a bunch of data, a new data model. It involved like a whole onboarding experience and a whole set of new screens. So this was more. You could go through the exact same feature, but perhaps it's only like a minute change to one particular component in your app or your website. So it really just depends on how complicated that particular feature is to build. Yeah.
For the qualitative data, how do you incentivize users to, especially the ones that stop using the app, how do you incentivize them to provide feedback?
We gave them a $25 Amazon gift card. Yeah.
And on the other side, around how to incentivize an executive to even do that qualitative research.
I mean, luckily, I think our execs are very much believers in the power of qualitative data to inform decisions. I think the other way, if you are not winning this argument, you could say, hey, I'm going to spend 2 months of engineering time, which comes out to being like $60,000 building this feature, and you don't know if it's the right feature. So I don't know if that helps. Hopefully it does. Let me know. Yes?
In uncovering those whys in that qualitative approach, what has been most effective in terms of your methodology of like focus groups or surveys or things like that?
So it depends on what we are looking for. Typically, we will do one sort of shorter survey and blast it out to a mailing list of a set of users that we've identified as having certain traits. In this case, it was all users who signed up after a certain date but did not complete a workout and then canceled. So we blast out the survey. We usually get a survey response of like a couple hundred, and then from those couple hundred, we'll sort of cull it down. And one of the final questions on the survey is, would you be willing to do a phone call in exchange for a $25 Amazon gift card? So we'll retarget the users who said yes. And then we go from there. So the survey allows us to get more responses using less time, but the in-depth sort of qualitative interviews allow you to really go deep and get to the meat and bones of like, why did this happen, or what was your specific experience? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was answering the question that I was going to ask. So like statistically relevant, like among users that you interview, like, it always seems like in any company that it's always like such a small percentage.
Yeah.
Besides like such a huge decision. So I did like the fact that you say that you started off with a survey, so you got some feedback at that point, and you will live down to the actual in person. But then like, where do you find the balance of like, I interview like I worked at one of these big companies, and it's like you interview like 16 people, and then you're gonna make a decision that essentially impacts like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Where do you find that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think the survey, starting with a survey and getting at least a couple hundred and seeing what the trends and patterns are amongst a couple hundred is a good first step and a good counterbalance towards like getting interview feedback from 12 people and, like you said, extrapolating that to everybody. I think even when we do the qualitative interviews with a small group, in this case it was 12 here, we will really only act on patterns or themes that are communicated by at least like a third of the survey respondents. Because the chances are that if you had 30% of people all sort of come to the same conclusion or mention the exact same thing, there probably is something there, and you can go out and replicate that. But the reality is that we're at a startup, it's me and one designer. Like, I don't have time to go out and interview 30 people, although I would really like to. So you sort of just have to kind of balance like the trade-off. And I know that's not a very good answer, but
do you go back and like analyze the data, like the usage data for the user experiences that have been vocalized by the 12 people that you interviewed? Do you find some relevance there?
Yeah, I mean, in general, yes, but it, like you saw with this particular case, when we were trying to figure out why they weren't completing the first workout, and they said, we were overwhelmed, I didn't know where to start. It's very hard to get that level of insight just from looking at trends on like where did they click and where did they, so like we can try to the best of our ability, but it's still going to lack that emotional story that we really need in order to be able to tell frame a compelling problem statement.
Okay, sure.
When you say complete a workout, do you mean are they actually starting a workout and then stopping midway, or that's something that they haven't even? Yeah,
when I say complete, I mean they've taken at least 50% of the workout is what we call complete. Yeah, because people who start and then like stop it after 10 seconds is not. Yep. So prototype testing was a following round after this. We did it with 10 people. We brought them into the office and we had a couple of different wireframes that they were all sort of playing around with. Yep. Yeah, so typically we will have a guide and we'll ask them to go through the entire flow. And so a usability testing session might be like, what do you think this particular screen is showing? What do you think would happen if you clicked on this? Or like, what are the different things you think you can do on this screen? And so really trying to get them to come up with a hypothesis without you sort of telling them or like asking them like, what do you think of this program here? So really only using the vocabulary that they give you and repeating it back to them as opposed to like leading them down a certain path. So yeah, there's a lot of great stuff out there on like how to run usability testing. Would definitely suggest you read that. I definitely can't do it justice in this like 1 minute Q&A session. So sorry, that's not like as comprehensive. Yeah. I'm sorry, can you just repeat? The main idea...
What's the main motivation to create applications and money or...
Oh, the main motivation behind the app, I mean, technically every business sort of, unless you're a nonprofit, you kind of need to make money in order to keep your lights on. But I think the reality, for us, the reason why the whole mission behind Aaptiv is we believe that quality fitness should be accessible to everyone. Like you shouldn't have to spend $35 on a SoulCycle class to get a great workout. Everybody should have the opportunity to feel healthy and strong and powerful, regardless of what your budget is. And that's why our subscription is like $15 a month as opposed to $36 a class for SoulCycle.